Ignore him completely. This triggers his regret fast. There's a moment in every connection, especially after a breakup, ghosting, or inconsistency, where you're tempted to reach out, to check if he's thinking about you, to see if he regrets losing you. But here's the truth. Real power comes from silence. When you ignore someone, not out of malice, but out of respect for yourself, you shift the dynamic instantly. The person who once had easy access to you begins to feel your absence like a vacuum, and it stings. Men don't regret losing someone who's always available. They regret losing someone who's valuable, rare, and unbothered. So the moment you stop chasing, explaining, or proving your worth, that's when you become unforgettable. This isn't about playing games. It's about remembering who you are. When someone doesn't step up, silence is louder than any explanation. When you ignore him, you're saying, I don't need your attention to feel worthy. I create my own peace. Let him wonder. Let him feel the space your absence creates. If he genuinely values you, he'll come back, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. And if he doesn't, you just made room for someone who will. So if you're feeling tempted to text, call, or remind him what he lost, don't. Let the silence speak. Let your life glow so loudly in his absence that he realizes he lost something rare. Ignoring him isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It tells him everything he needs to know. You're not an option, you're a priority. And if he couldn't see that, he was never the right one to begin with. When you stop reaching out to someone who once had access to you, something powerful begins to happen. You shift from being predictable to being mysterious, from being emotionally available to emotionally grounded. This change doesn't go unnoticed, especially by someone who was used to your presence, your energy, and your consistency. The act of going silent, of stepping back, creates space. And that space is where value begins to grow. People often take for granted what is always there. When you're constantly available, constantly the one initiating conversations or making efforts, your presence becomes routine. It's no longer special, no longer intriguing. But the moment you pull back, the moment you stop initiating and allow silence to settle in, the other person is forced to notice what they no longer have. That absence speaks volumes in a way that words never could. It leaves room for thought, reflection, and sometimes regret. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. It creates a shift in dynamic. When you're no longer chasing validation from someone, when you no longer need their replies or attention to feel seen or valued, you reclaim your personal authority. This isn't about ghosting or being cold. It's about preserving your energy for people who value and reciprocate it. It's about making a silent but loud declaration that you're no longer investing in one-sided dynamics. What's often misunderstood is that silence isn't a tactic, it's a boundary. It's a declaration of self-worth. It says, if you want to be in my life, you have to show up. I won't beg, I won't chase, I won't settle for breadcrumbs. That kind of energy is magnetic. It disrupts the pattern the other person has become used to. They start questioning things. Why isn't she calling me? Why didn't she reply? Has she moved on? Is she talking to someone else? That internal dialogue is the beginning of regret. And regret, especially for men who once took you for granted, isn't immediate. It comes slowly, creeping in as they realize you're no longer there. They notice your absence in their routine, in their quiet moments, and most importantly, in the things that used to be effortless but are now gone. They begin to reflect on how easy they had it and how little they appreciated it. That's when the silence hits the hardest. That's when the regret becomes real. But none of this works if your silence is forced or filled with resentment. It only works when your silence comes from strength. When you're not sitting around waiting for a response or wondering if they miss you. It works when your focus shifts inward toward your healing, your growth, your joy. When your silence becomes a sanctuary, not a prison. When your value is defined by you and not someone else's attention. By stepping back and going silent, you create a void that wasn't there before. A void that makes the other person feel the weight of losing you. A void that reminds them that access to you is a privilege, not a given. And that kind of silence, the one rooted in confidence and clarity, creates more value than any words ever could. Regret is not something that comes immediately after a breakup or disconnection. It doesn't hit the moment you stop talking to someone. Instead, it builds in the silence, in the stillness, and in the ordinary moments of life that now feel a little emptier. When someone is used to your presence, your affection, your energy, it becomes part of their daily rhythm. But when that rhythm is disrupted and you're no longer part of their everyday experience, the impact of your absence begins to settle in. That's when regret starts to grow. The truth is, people don't often realize what they have until it's gone. Especially when you've been consistent, giving, and emotionally present. When that kind of support or attention is always available, it can start to feel expected. But once it's removed, a contrast is created. Suddenly, their world is quieter. They no longer get your good morning messages, your check-ins, your laughter, your insights. All those moments that seem small at the time now become glaringly missing. And that's where the seed of regret is planted. What makes regret powerful is not just the absence of communication, but the lack of emotional reassurance they once relied on. When you walk away without drama, without begging, and simply let go, you create a space they can't fill with distractions. At first, they may try. They may surround themselves with people, jump into casual conversations, or pretend to be unaffected. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Late at night, when they're alone with their thoughts, they start to feel it. The gap, the void, the loss. Regret builds when they start to remember the way you made them feel. Safe, admired, appreciated, seen. And they begin to realize how they may have overlooked that. It's not just about missing you. It's about missing the feeling of being deeply connected to someone who genuinely cared. They may scroll through old messages or pictures, trying to recapture a sense of what they had, but it's not the same. They know they can't go back and just pick up where things left off, not when you've gone silent and started living on your own terms. That's why silence is so powerful. Because you're not forcing them to see your value, you're letting the space you leave behind do that work for you. You're giving them a chance to feel the absence of what they once had so easily. And for someone who was complacent or unaware, that absence can be a sharp wake-up call. It's the kind of realization that doesn't just bring a wave of missing someone, it brings accountability. It makes them question how they treated you, what they did wrong, and why they let someone like you slip away. And if the connection mattered to them at all, that realization triggers an emotional response they can't shake off quickly. That's when regret becomes real, not in the moment you walk away, but in the stillness of the moments that follow, when they're left to sit with the echo of your absence and the weight of everything they didn't appreciate while they had the chance. Ignoring someone isn't about being mean or manipulative. It's about choosing yourself over emotional chaos. When you stop responding to someone who didn't value your presence, you're not playing hard to get. You're simply setting a standard for how you expect to be treated. This kind of silence is not a trick. It's not part of some game to win them back. It's an act of self-respect. You're no longer available for one-sided conversations, half-hearted efforts, or situations that leave you feeling confused, anxious, or undervalued. And that shift in energy is where your true power lies. Often, people confuse ignoring with revenge, but there's a fundamental difference. Revenge is rooted in anger, in trying to hurt someone because they hurt you, but ignoring someone from a place of self-respect is different. It's rooted in clarity. You're not trying to cause them pain. You're just done allowing their inconsistent behavior to have space in your life. You've decided your peace is more important than their mixed signals. This decision to ignore isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with a long message explaining why you're done. It's quiet. It's intentional. It looks like no longer checking your phone hoping they text. It looks like unfollowing them not to make a point, but because their updates disturb your peace. It looks like walking away from a conversation that keeps going in circles. It's not about being passive-aggressive. It's about removing your emotional energy from places that drain you. Choosing not to engage, not to reply, and not to chase sends a stronger message than any emotionally charged confrontation ever could. It shows the other person that you're not someone who sticks around for crumbs. You are someone who sets standards. You're no longer going to give unlimited access to someone who doesn't show up for you with intention and clarity. This kind of silence is powerful because it's not desperate. It's not you waiting on the sidelines. It's you stepping off the field entirely. And when you ignore someone with grace, not coldness, but quiet strength, it forces them to confront your absence. Not because you've yelled or pleaded, but because you've simply removed yourself. You've created distance without explanation, and in that distance, they are left to deal with the consequences of their own actions, or lack thereof. The real beauty in this approach is that you shift your focus from them to you. You start to realize that your time, energy, and emotional presence are not to be given freely to anyone who hasn't earned them. You begin to see that being available to the wrong person keeps you unavailable for the right one. You come home to yourself. You reconnect with your worth, your boundaries, your purpose. Ignoring someone who didn't show up for you isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's a quiet declaration that says, I know what I bring to the table, I know what I deserve, and I'm not going to wait around hoping you figure that out. I'm moving forward, with or without you. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop chasing someone who doesn't see your value. It's the moment you decide that instead of pouring your energy into trying to be noticed, understood, or chosen, you redirect that energy back into yourself. You stop checking if they've texted, stop analyzing what they meant, and stop waiting for them to come around. You replace the habit of chasing with the act of reclaiming your power. And in doing so, something remarkable happens. Your value multiplies. People often think that to keep someone interested, they have to remain in pursuit, to prove how loyal, patient, or devoted they are. But that mindset stems from a place of fear, the fear of losing someone. What's far more magnetic, far more impactful, is when someone realizes you were willing to walk away from what wasn't serving you, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about yourself. Replacing rather than chasing doesn't mean jumping into a rebound relationship or forcing yourself to get over someone quickly. It means mentally and emotionally shifting your attention. It's making the conscious choice to open yourself to new possibilities rather than staying stuck in a cycle of confusion. It's about finding peace in your own presence and not relying on their attention to feel worthy. When someone doesn't value you, chasing them only teaches them one thing, that they can keep giving you less and you'll still be there. It reinforces their behavior, validates their inconsistency, and ultimately chips away at your self-worth. But the moment you stop running toward them and start walking away, they feel it. The energy changes. You're no longer orbiting their world. You're centered in your own. That absence becomes loud, louder than words, louder than arguments. They start to wonder what you're doing, who you're talking to, why you're not reaching out. And ironically, the very attention you were begging for before now begins to flow in. But the beauty of this shift is that by the time it does, you've already started moving on. You're no longer that version of yourself who needed their approval. By choosing to replace the act of chasing with new focuses, whether it's your goals, passions, social life, or even self-care routines, you create a new version of your life where you are the priority. This doesn't just make you feel better, it changes the dynamic entirely. The person who once had the power to ignore you now sees that you're no longer waiting. You've stopped making them the center of your emotional universe. That is the most powerful thing you can do, because the right person, the one who truly values you, will never need to be chased. They'll show up with intention, effort, and clarity. And by removing yourself from the wrong person, you create the space for the right one to finally find you. Let your silence, your growth, and your peace be the loudest response to someone who couldn't see your worth. Don't chase, replace, and watch everything change. There's a difference between being wanted and being valued. Many people are attracted to you when you're constantly available, responsive, and emotionally invested. But the moment you step into your own power and stop trying to prove your worth, that's when your true magnetism surfaces. When you carry yourself like the prize rather than acting like someone waiting to be chosen, you shift the entire dynamic of how others engage with you. You're no longer hoping to be seen, you already see yourself. And that is exactly what makes others stop and take notice. When you stop chasing and start focusing on your own growth, joy, and peace, you begin to radiate something that's rare: self-respect. That's the energy of someone who knows what they bring to the table. Someone who doesn't beg for attention, but instead commands it by the way they carry themselves. This isn't about arrogance or playing games. It's about living with the belief that if someone truly wants to be with you, they will show up fully, without confusion, hesitation, or games. The person who deserves you will never need to be convinced. They will recognize your value, not because you shouted it, but because it was evident in your silence, your boundaries, and the way you treat yourself. Being the prize means you don't negotiate your standards for temporary comfort. It means you're okay walking away if something doesn't feel right, even if your heart is involved. It means trusting that what's meant for you will never have to be chased. This doesn't mean you don't care or don't have feelings. It means your self-worth doesn't hinge on someone else's ability to appreciate it. You're open to love, but you're no longer available for confusion. You welcome affection, but you don't tolerate inconsistency. You're emotionally present, but you're not emotionally desperate. And that balance makes you powerful. When you treat yourself like the prize, the right person won't run from your standards. They'll recognize that being in your life is a privilege, not an entitlement. They'll show up, not out of guilt or fear of losing you, but out of genuine desire to be part of your world. That kind of connection doesn't require convincing. It feels safe, solid, and real. And here's the truth: people mirror how you treat yourself. If you act like you're not enough, they'll believe it. If you behave like you need them to validate your worth, they'll think they have that power. But when you stand in your value, when you show that you are whole, with or without them, they either step up or step aside. And that's exactly how it should be. You don't win someone over by shrinking yourself or proving your worth. You win them over by standing tall in your truth, showing up with confidence, and letting your silence speak where words no longer serve. Be the prize. Let them come to you, not because you demanded it, but because your presence is undeniable and your energy is unforgettable. Thank you so much for listening today. I truly appreciate your time and energy. If this message resonated with you, remember you are worthy of love, respect, and consistency. Never forget that your silence, your standards, and your self-worth are your greatest tools. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and most of all, stay true to yourself. Take care, and thank you again.